Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. We're continuing work on the spindle drive gear sleeve and repairing the internal splines of this component. In the last video we were able to take a off-the-shelf hub that had splines that were almost a perfect match for the 6-spline drive shaft and machine it down to be a sleeve that I can press into the spindle drive gear sleeve to replace the severely worn splines of that piece of the universal head. Well, now that we have the new one machined and ready to go, we need to prepare the original spindle drive gear sleeve to accept this replacement. You might recall from the last video that there are actually two different sets of splines inside this sleeve. There's one set near the end, and there's another set that's about halfway down the length of the shaft. And each of these are only about an inch and a half long. Well, it would be impossible for me to bore out a section of this sleeve in the center for me to press in a new set of splines had I made two sets of replacements. The wall thickness here is just entirely too thin. There just wouldn't be enough of this sleeve left over. So once I get this sleeve dialed in on the forejaw, I'm just going to take a boring bar and get rid of them the rest of the way. There's really only about 60 thousandths of the spline left in the first place. I don't know what the real reason is behind having both sets other than having two different points of contact. But honestly, I don't see it affecting the usability of the universal head at all. I'll try to take it easy on this small carbide insert. This is an interrupted cut, and this thing does have some hardness to it. So we'll take our time and nibble away at the remainder of these splines. Well, I have the sleeves switched around in the forejaw now that the machining of those other splines is complete. I also have a little heavier of a boring bar in the tool post holder. I only need to go in about 1.5 inches from the end of the sleeve. And again, an interrupted cut, so I wanted to use something a little bit more rigid than a small boring bar just to avoid any potential chatter problems. Well, this is not the greatest start. It looks like this piece of carbide brazed on the end of this boring bar has chipped. So I'll need to go grab a different one. I guess that last cut was a little bit too aggressive. Well, I have another one of these brazed carbide boring bars here in the tool holder. It's a little bit longer than the other one. These I got from Shars sometime last year. I primarily got them to use in the boring head on the milling machine, but they also fit in this tool holder as well. And being thicker, you would hope that they'd be more rigid than the thinner one that I have. Unfortunately, either I'm taking too heavy of a cut or this is just some poor quality carbide because I managed to chip a second one. I think I'm just going to risk it and use the thinner boring bar with the carbide insert. Well, I do need to take a couple of seconds here to reset the depth on the dial indicator I have on the Waze. Coming in at 1.04 inches from the face of the sleeve. So I've got this dial indicator, so it will take one full revolution before hitting the 0, and that will tell me when I'm at depth. I'll continue making passes here now with this other boring bar, starting here with about a 5/1000 depth of cut, which will be adding 0.10 to the diameter of the inner bore. This is going to be a pretty critical operation here. I definitely do not want to overshoot the dimension here. I'm looking for something around 1 inch 399 thousandths to 1 inch 400 thousandths. I can't go any larger than that out of fear that even the press fit sleeve may not have enough crush to hold it in place. I'm going to be stopping this thing periodically to take new measurements just to give myself some peace of mind that I'm not going to be going too far. I've also machined a plug gauge that's half of a thousandth shy of 1 inch 400 thousandths. And I'll use it to test it every now and again, knowing that if it just barely starts to go, then I know I'm on dimension. And it certainly doesn't hurt to use the actual piece just to double check to see that it doesn't go in. I am taking as shallow of a cut as I can here on these last few, and I've slowed down the feed rate pretty significantly to try to preserve as good a surface finish as I possibly can. After each of these passes, I am taking a measurement, even though I won't see much of a change. I'm really trying to sneak up on this final dimension. I would like to get around a 3/1000th shrink fit on this piece. We'll test with the plug gauge, and it barely doesn't want to go in, which means I'm really close. I also machined a little bit of a lip on the spline piece, and it barely wants to insert into that hole. And it's a few thousandths less than the overall diameter of that press-in piece. So I think I'm exactly where I want to be. We'll verify here with one last measurement, and then we can chamfer the inside of the bore. We should be ready to press in these splines. Well, I have the sleeve set up in my arbor press, and I'm going to go ahead and use the oxyacetylene torch to heat this up. and expand it. The only reason why I have it here in the arbor press is really some place to put it where I don't have to handle it. And if I need to press in that sleeve, then I'm here already. It's all lined up, and it shouldn't take any effort then to go ahead and finish pressing the sleeve in if it doesn't just slip in. Well, this shouldn't take very much time at all to heat this up. I'm looking for a target temperature probably around 350 degrees. 300 degrees should give me about a 3,000ths expansion on the inner diameter, which, if my measurements are all correct, the splined sleeve or insert should drop right in. Well, I've got my short test shaft inside the sleeve just in case, and it looks like my calculations were good, and that just dropped right in. I'm going to drop the ram on top of it just to make sure it stays in place while I let this cool. Well, this has cooled down sufficiently over the last couple of hours so we can take it out of the arbor press and take a look at it over at the bench. Well, I am super happy with how this turned out. Had this not worked, I would have gone and tried one of those other options, but I'm really happy I didn't have to go through the hassle, at least for now, in machining these internal splines. The drive shaft slides on the entire distance. Nothing got overly crushed from the heat shrink, so I guess the math doesn't lie. Well, we're getting ready to be able to reassemble this universal head. There still are some things that I have to deal with. Notably is these bearings here on the spindle itself. These are special bearings. They can't just be removed. This cage is put in place. And two of these rollers here are heavily pitted from rust. So I haven't completely decided how I'm going to handle this. I am replacing the companion bearing cup that this mates with, and if I put the new one on top of the bearing, it doesn't feel too bad at all. I can't really feel any significant roughness, so I may just run it as it is. I'm leaving open the possibility that these bearings are going to just stay here the way they are. I may take some stone and try to make sure that there are no high spots. I don't think there are, but I'll probably take a stone over these rollers just to be sure. More significantly, I still need to machine or finish machining this drive gear. Now this will mount on the spindle and drive the driven gear that drives that drive shaft that we've been working on and that sleeve. So these are all pretty critical components. Now this gear that was made and given to me by my friend Cooper needs a little bit of machining done to it, yet it's a bit too thick and I need to machine a disc for it. And I also need to figure out how to mount it to the machine. I do have this tool holder blank. It's a Cat 40 blank, and I think this is what I'm going to end up using to make an arbor to mount this gear on. I'll have to do some heavy machining on it, but I think it certainly is going to be doable. But all that's going to have to wait for another video. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. It does help out with the algorithm. And if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. And that bell icon will let you know when I publish another video. And a big shout out to those that are supporting the channel on Patreon and other ways. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.